You are always going to benefit in life from having a plan no matter what you're doing, and the same is true for something as fun and maybe silly as fantasy football. Now, I've drafted over 100 teams so far this summer, and this is the exact plan and strategy I'm using to win my leagues, and I believe you should as well. Starting in round 1, where we'll target value over upside because you want reliability. And generally speaking, a lot of guys in this range will give you reliability, but you want to avoid guys who might be a little bit sketchy. Maybe like a Justin Jefferson with the new quarterback situation. Maybe like a Puka Nacua who doesn't really have the longest track record when Cooper Kupp is on the field of producing, right? Obviously, if you're early on in the draft, just go ahead and get the most reliable players in fantasy, McCaffrey, CeeDee Lamb type players, Tyreek Hill. But assuming most of you, 70 to 80 to 90% of you won't be in that range, well, you can start to look to the end. And that's where I was in a recent draft. Because as you can see right here, I got the 12th overall pick, the last pick in the draft, but I landed with a great player in my opinion in Jonathan Taylor. Because honestly, I think that Taylor is going massively overlooked right now, and a lot of it just has to do with like murky situations the past couple of years, which mostly deals with his contract and previous season injuries. Because it's not like Taylor was bad last year, even though like everybody assumes that. This dude finished 12th overall in fantasy points per game, and over the last 5 games of the year, he was actually a top 5 back once again, like he has been in the past. And this was all just having like an average touchdown year, competing with different running backs back there. His own quarterback, Anthony Richardson, getting hurt early in the season. And I think a big reason why people don't remember all the great things like in 2021 where he was an MVP candidate, I think they're forgetting that because of past injuries. And there's been a lot of them these last 2 years. In 2022, he had the ankle injury. He had the high ankle sprain after that. That ended up ruining his entire season, ends it early. In 2023, he starts the season on the PUP list with ankle issue and also some contract issues, then has more ankle soreness in week 5, and then has a torn thumb ligament in week 12. I mean, this guy basically wasn't playing healthy at all the past year and a half. But now things are looking up because he doesn't have Gardner Minshew anymore. He has Anthony Richardson with a good coach and an offense that should be able to move the ball and get to the red zone more. And Taylor himself not only gets Anthony Richardson back, but he doesn't have Jonathan, or he doesn't have Zach Moss in the backfield. Zach Moss, who was a veteran running back who was used a decent amount last year, especially early on when Taylor was hurt and on the PUP list. Now he's dealing with Evan Hull. Not many NFL carries. I think only 2 touches. Trey Sermon was basically dropped by the 49ers, who love to give any running back a chance immediately almost on that team after 1 year. Tyler Goodson, no threats here. And as I hinted at earlier, let's not forget the last fully healthy season that Taylor played in when he played 17 games. Now, I'm not expecting this to ever happen again, especially with a mobile quarterback now who will see some rushing yards himself. 1,800 rushing yards, over 2,000 total yards. It's just showing you, though, this guy still has the pedigree at just 25 years old still, people. So that's the idea and the goal for round 1. Taylor's a great target late in the first round. Now, for round 2, it's the same exact thing. Nothing changes. You want to target value over upside. And now here's a tip for you. There's no special formula for which position you should take in the first 2 rounds. I always get asked, should I go wide receiver, running back, wide receiver, running back? Just take the best available value. And in round 2, you're going to have a lot of great options. Oftentimes, you'll see Garrett Wilson and Jahmyr Gibbs fall here. Jonathan Taylor sometimes falls here. And then you keep scrolling. Just lots of studs from past seasons. And Devontae Adams, Saquon Barkley's a solid option. And the guy that I personally took in my draft in round 2, and I had back-to-back picks here, was Drake London, because there's no way he would have been there all the way until my 3rd round pick. And now here's the deal with Drake London. Maybe people are overblowing that he's this good. I just took him 13th overall. I think that's honestly appropriate, especially knowing that he's not going to be there with my next pick, at the end of the 3rd round. But on paper, everything's looking good for this guy. He gets the quarterback upgrade in Kirk Cousins, who is coming off of an injury, but if we assume he's not really a mobile passer, so the Achilles shouldn't affect him all that much, maybe mentally, but assuming that he's fine, he gets the upgrade there. He gets the upgrade from his offensive coordinator. He goes from a run-first coach in Arthur Smith to now Zach Robinson, who is a first-time offensive coordinator, but spent a lot of time with Sean McVay. And coaches and offensive coordinators matter, but honestly, the quarterback matters more when you look at correlations between fantasy success. Good quarterbacks versus good coaches. Good quarterbacks matter a lot more, and that kind of makes some sense. That's not what Drake London has had the past couple of years, and Desmond Ridder, and Marcus Mariota, and Taylor Heineke last season. It's been far from what he's going to have this year in Kirk Cousins. And besides Kyle Pitts, there's not a ton of competition. I do like Darnell Mooney, especially later on in drafts, but there's not a ton of competition for number 1 receiver targets. So Drake London in round 2. And round 2 is a weird part of drafts right now. It's kind of hard to get a good grasp on what stands out in round 2. In my opinion, there's a couple of solid receivers, and Drake London is one of them. Now, in round 3, you want to look for upside at any single position. This is exactly where we can find some league winners, round 3 to like round 5. Last year, we saw guys like Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall in this range. Across other positions, we saw some of the best quarterbacks like Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts get taken here. So in round 3, it becomes upside. We start to want to look at upside at any position, right? You see Josh Allen starts to go in this range. You can see some tight ends and Sam Laporta. Of course, there's still some talented wide receivers like a Mike Evans, like a Jalen Jalen Waddle. Derrick Henry is a great running back option if you have not yet already secured a running back, in my opinion, but we have in Jonathan Taylor in this specific draft that I'm showing you. Now, I went ahead at this point in the third round and I said, screw it. I'm getting one of the best, if not the best quarterbacks in the draft, and I went with my third round pick being Jalen Hurts. And you're looking at one of the best quarterbacks in overall fantasy these last couple of years. I mean, if you just look at his finishes, and honestly, it might be an upgrade now. You can see the quarterback won, and then last year, even though he was hurt the second half of the season and struggled a lot those final 4 to 6 games, number 2 in fantasy points per game. Why is that when he's only throwing 20 touchdowns a year and sometimes not even breaking 20 touchdowns? Because of this right here. His rushing touchdowns, 15. 13, 10 plus in 3 straight seasons. His rushing yards, over 600. And this was a down year last year, again, because he got hurt later in the season. You had 700 and nearly 800 in the years before that. He has all the cheat codes in the world, and now he's actually healthy. And some people might point to the offensive line and say, look at all these pieces that they lost, right? They ended up getting their center in Kelsey retiring. Jason Kelsey retires. They lose Jack Driscoll. They lose some other depth pieces, but they kind of just bring these guys back, whether it's the drafting a couple of guards you can see right here, getting Matt Hennessy or Mekhi Becton in free agency and seeing what they can get back out of Mekhi Becton, who had a lot of potential with the Jets and then just kind of fell apart. Injuries, weight, all that stuff were issues. So I'm not concerned about the offensive line. He has one of the best pass protecting running backs and a 235-pound Saquon Barkley just bricked up, made out of muscle paws. So when I'm looking for an elite player at any position with upside, it's Jalen Hurts in round 3. Now for round 4. Get a wide receiver here or draft Isaiah Pacheco if you don't have a running back yet. And now here's another tip for you. Don't fill your starting lineup first. Just aim to take the best available player at all times in your draft. And for me in round 4, I ended up going and getting that wide receiver and also the best available player, and that was T. Higgins. Now, Higgins wasn't great last year. He finished just 40th out of the wide receivers. I mean, honestly, this is atrocious. There's no way he should go in the 4th round if we think this is going to be the case again, but we don't, because he was hurt all year and so was his quarterback. They really barely had any games together. So let's not remember him like that player, the 40th overall wide receiver. Instead, let's look at what he did when actually Joe Burrow has been healthy in his career. Higgins averages 14.1 points and 7.5 targets with Burrow healthy. That's 30% more production with Burrow in there, and that's exactly about a top 20 wide receiver or so. So I think Higgins is great, but like I said, if you don't have a running back yet, if you didn't get the Jonathan Taylors in round 1, if you didn't get the Derrick Henry type in round 3, then go ahead and get Isaiah Pacheco. In my opinion, by far the best running back in the 4th round, and then there's kind of like a fall off after this when you start to get into some of the later rounds. This is a guy in Pacheco who's a former 7th round pick, and just his second year in the NFL finished top 15 in fantasy points, although down the stretch, the second half of the season, from week 9 on, it wasn't the 14th overall finish. He was a top 5 running back. And now this is a guy who had the 8th best usage in terms of his overall targets, his carries, his snaps, his routes run, the 8th best usage amongst any running back. Second half of the season, he was number 2, averaging over 20 opportunities per game. And nothing should really change this year as the team only brought in Keontae Ingram. They lose Jerick McKinnon, a pass-catching veteran running back. They brought back Clyde Edwards-Helaire on a 1-year deal, but other than that, really nothing here. Some people will point out some unrestricted free agents. Some people will point out to the rugby player, Luis Reese-Cement. None of this matters at all for Isaiah Pacheco, the best running back by far in round 4. In round 5, you want to take the best available running back or wide receiver, and this is going to depend on the tiers that you're drafting with. And for me, the best available running back or wide receiver in round 5, it was actually a running back, and it was the veteran in Joe Mixon. And now, beautiful people, here is another tip for you. Here's the deal. By round 5, which we're at right now, you can see this is my draft. Jonathan Taylor is on underdog, Drake London, Jalen Hurts, T. Higgins, Joe Mixon. My tip for you is that in your first 5 rounds of the draft, you want a minimum of 2 wide receivers. Ideally, you can get 3, but we spent one of our picks on an elite quarterback in Jalen Hurts, so I'm fine with that. So we have our 2, Drake London and T. Higgins. And the reason why I state this tip is because here's the deal. After this, and you're going to start to see it, the wide receiver position starts to dry up a little bit. Not completely, but it starts to dry up a little bit. So again, that tip is you want at least 2 wide receivers with the first 5 picks in your drafts, and in a lot of situations, 3 if you didn't spend a pick on an elite tight end or quarterback. Now, for me, at this point in the draft, I took Joe Mixon. You might be saying, oh, you took back-to-back Bengals players? No, you must be mistaken or at least forgetting, and maybe it's because he's in a Bengals uniform on Player Profiler still here, but no, he's now a member of the Houston Texans. They traded for him and then immediately signed him to a 3-year deal. And this veteran running back is indeed aging, but he's still producing on high volume. They just trust him to get a lot of touches because he can catch passes, pass protect. Even last year, he was top 12, even though his efficiency dropped off. Year before that, top 8, even though the efficiency dropped off, and he had for a running back that plays a lot of games, 9 touchdowns, it's nothing extraordinary, right? Every single year, or 6 of the last 7 years, he's finished as a top 12 back. And if we look at his competition, there's just really not a lot of threats into getting a lot of touches or a lot of competition in this backfield. There's Dameon Pierce, who barely averaged 2.5 yards per carry last year. A 6th-round rookie in Jawar Jordan that I'm not worried about. J.J. Taylor, who might make the team, and if he does, probably has like a special teams player. So that's why I go Mixon in round 5. He was the best available, either running back or wide receiver at that point. Now let's talk about another tip. You want to draft with player tiers and not rankings. And what that means is when you're talking about tools, you want to use tiers, because as you can see right here, like tier 1, this is a part of the fantasy blueprint. These are my specific tiers as of right now. They're going to be updated weekly as well during the offseason. Tier 1 shows you, okay, these are the 4 running backs in tier 1 as of right now. Now, if these 4 guys go in like the first round, now you start to look at, okay, who's left in tier 1 of the wide receivers, because that's most likely going to be a better player. You could also use the top 250 rankings as well when you're drafting. That would be right here in the fantasy blueprint. Shows you every single position and where they're ranked compared to other positions. So you want to be using tiers. A top 250 kind of goes hand in hand. Now you can get these tiers anywhere, but if you want to use mine that I have used for hundreds of drafts this offseason and 10,000 people are currently using as well this year and in the past, well, you just click this button right here and you could actually get my fantasy blueprint, where all these tools and a whole lot more are risk-free, by just signing up with one of our partners. So as you can see right here, if you sign up with a partner, it becomes risk-free. I malfunctioned there for a second, and a big reason why is I just went on a run and now I have to kind of get fluids back in me. So I'm drinking a lot of fluids while trying to do this. So my mouth goes from being dry to being extremely too moist, and then I malfunction. But let's bring it back here. It is risk-free. Look, you will get this for just $10, a one-time payment if you sign up to one of our partners. And the risk-free part, if you don't make your fantasy playoffs for whatever reason, I just give you that $10 back and you get to use the tools all for your draft and all year long. That's the big thing. This is not just for your fantasy draft. Every single week of the NFL season, I continue to send you tools to help you beat your friends. So if you want to join the thousands and 10,000 plus other people who have used and are currently using the blueprint, scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description below. Now in round 6, you either want to get an elite tight end or quarterback if available, or go for another wide receiver. And for me in this draft in round 6, it ended up being Deontay Johnson. But honestly, here's the deal. This was an underdog draft, so quarterbacks go, or wide receivers go, a little bit earlier. In your home league, Deontay's not going to go till like round 7 at the earliest. And before we break down as to why I took Deontay, I just want to go over a tip here. And this is a nice spot in this draft. You see these 3 blue squares right here? We can put a box around them. My beautiful editor, help me out there. There we go. You can see here, these 3 running backs, James Conner, Zach Moss, DeAndre Swift. That's fine to take 3 players of the same position in a row, but what you don't want to do is take a 4th. So this guy right here who took Rashid Shaheed, this was a great idea, because if you would have taken another running back here, now you're by far getting the worst value running back in that part of the draft. And this doesn't matter for like the first 1 or 2 or 3 rounds of your draft, because all those guys are good players. It's fine if there's like 5 or 6 that go in a row at the position, but in the middle rounds, if there's so many guys going at the same position, 4 plus to be exact, just pivot to a different position so you could actually get a better value, if that makes sense, at that point in the draft, instead of the worst one left available after a bunch of them just went. Now in round 6, but most likely in your fantasy drafts in round 7, because wide receivers won't go early. That's just the way that underdog scoring is. And some people might say, oh, why are you using underdog then as a model right now? Well, because when I go into some of the mock drafts on like NFL.com or Sleeper or wherever, everybody leaves after 4 rounds. So I don't get an actual draft. An underdog, you have to pay money to get in, so they stay in the draft. So, you take what you can get at this point. But as I was saying, Deontay Johnson, yes, we took him in round 6, probably be there in round 7 for you. He's joining an offense that last year ranked 28th in passing, 30th in offense overall. Why do we like this guy, Sal? Well, simply put, it's not the same offensive as last year. We'll break it all down, but as you can see, they made a lot of additions right here. 6 offensive additions, 3 on the offensive line. They got a couple of offensive pieces, a tight end, the running back, a wide receiver in the draft, a brand new head coach who comes over as a nice offensive guru the last couple of years with a couple of poor teams that he turned into playoff teams. And that man's name, as you can see right up here highlighted, is Dave Canales. And like I said, he brought a couple of bad teams these last couple of years. Now, he wasn't the head coach or anything like that. He was a quarterback coach of the Seahawks, but he turned around Geno Smith, made him a comeback player of the year and a playoff quarterback. Last year, as the offensive coordinator, gets an upgrade to be the OC of Tampa Bay, brings them to the playoffs and gets Baker a $100 million deal in the offseason. And now he's the Carolina Panthers head coach, trying to do the same for Bryce Young in this offense. And like I said, the team improved. They brought in a lot of new pieces. They get Damian Lewis, a guard. He's a nice addition overall. They get Robert Hunt, who they paid a lot of money. He's a nice addition overall. They also brought in another piece in Yas Neiman, who was like a depth piece for the Packers at tackle. Easily could be a starter on most NFL offensive lines. And then you go back to the offensive environment. In the NFL draft, they get a first-round wide receiver. They get a second-round running back that they traded up for. They get JT Sanders, a 4th-round tight end. Maybe he'll be involved this year. Was talented at Texas. And they bring in Deontay Johnson himself. All those offensive lineman pieces. Everything here is looking better for this offense, and that's going to help Deontay Johnson if it means Bryce Young is improving. So this wide receiver core looks a lot better than last year. Now you have Deontay Johnson, a first-round wide receiver in Xavier Lockett, and Adam Thielen, who's getting older but still now should have less attention, still be a reliable 2nd or 3rd option. And Deontay's honestly just like a younger Adam Thielen, as you can see right here, since 2020, including all pass catchers. So tight ends are on here. Deontay ranks 7th with 547 targets earned during that time. The dude knows how to get open at all levels of the field, but obviously short and intermediate is his game, and that's where he stands out. Just knows how to get open. That's going to help Bryce Young and himself. Now we head to round 7, and the idea here is to draft a wide receiver. Yes, a wide receiver again here. And in round 7 of this draft for myself, I went out and I got the veteran Tyler Lockett with my 7th round pick. And again, like I mentioned earlier, Lockett in like your home leagues isn't probably going to go to at earliest the 8th round, probably the 9th or the 10th round in some drafts, but in the 7th round, oftentimes you'll see Deontay Johnson, who we talked about earlier. Oftentimes at the wide receiver position, you'll start to see Christian Watson available. Lad McConkey, a rookie, is like the 7th or 8th round. These are the types of guys that you can expect to take at this point in the draft. But I do like Lockett, and 7th round is probably rich for your home leagues, but when he's there in the 8th or 9th round, that's who you should be targeting, in my opinion. Probably the 10th round is where you can wait. And here's the elephant in the room. He's now 32 years old, but here's also the important piece. His outlook last year was good. He ranked 20th in overall EPA. That's your wide receiver efficiency, how efficient he was. And then you look at him earning targets last season. We scroll up here. He earned over 7 targets per game in this offense when his quarterback was struggling at times, Geno Smith. Otherwise, probably would have put up better numbers, which was borderline top 20 volume as well. So still a talented receiver, and the environment this year looks good. Because yeah, he'll still be competing with DK Metcalf, the obvious number 1 receiver on the team, but he goes rounds earlier than Lockett. And yeah, he'll still also have, if we pull it up here on Player Profiler, JSN. But JSN's mostly a slot receiver. Lockett can win in the slot and out wide, should stay on the field a lot more, and also now has a new offensive coordinator in Ryan Grubb from college. And Grubb is just going to mean more 3 wide receiver sets, more downfield usage overall, which means more explosive plays for a guy like Lockett, who should stay on the outside a decent amount of the time. So I do like Lockett. The guy's so reliable. You go through his games played, he's only missed 1 game all the way back here at the end of the season. I think it was a fibula or a femur or something ended up breaking. So I like Lockett at that point in the 7th round of underdog drafts. Again, in your home leagues, you'll probably see him out there. You can target him later. Now, in rounds 8 through 10, you want to lead running backs over wide receiver in these rounds. Because here's your tip. Since 2010, we've only seen 4 wide receivers in this range of the draft finish as top 12 wide receivers. Now, you want to lean running backs over wide receivers, but also it's a chance where you can maybe get another elite tight end if there's still some available, or you can go out and get an elite quarterback like Jaden Daniels, who's an elite quarterback here, goes outside the top 100 picks, usually around round 10. But we'll start with round 8. And in round 8, I leaned running back over receiver, and I went with a workhorse, in my opinion, potential workhorse back on the Patriots, Ramondre Stevenson. And here's the deal. I get it. This situation at quarterback, a first-round rookie in Drake May, Jacoby Brissett, a veteran who might start the year there, it's not all that ideal, but if you want to look at just his competition, you're not going to have any more Zeke there. He was replaced by Antonio Gibson, who's not one of the greatest runners, definitely a solid pass catcher as a former wide receiver in college, but I still think that Ramondre Stevenson is easily the more well-rounded player. With their quarterback situation right now, you're probably going to want to still lean on the run, and obviously Ramondre can catch passes based on his past experience, and a lot of reasons why Ramondre last year struggled, he just dealt with so many injuries. Look at this. A thigh bruise early on has kind of kept him limited to beginning to middle of the year. An ankle sprain mid-season. Late season, a high ankle sprain. I mean, this guy basically outside of the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season was banged up. So now we'll get kind of a fair shake at it, but still the offensive environment, we're not going to be shocked if this is like one of the worst offenses in the league, because it could really go either way. They have a young team. They got the new quarterback in the draft in Drake May. They got their new wide receivers in the draft in Jalen Polk and also Javon Baker. They brought in KJ Osborne. They brought in Antonio Gibson. Like we said, the offense overall, there's a lot of moving pieces. So it's not like Ramondre is a slam dunk pick, but he's also not going in the 3rd round of drafts where he went last year. He's now going in the 8th round, and not that much has changed. He was banged up last year. The offense still stinks, but he's going 5 rounds later. I'll take Ramondre here. Now in round 9, I still lean running back over wide receiver, and I went ahead and got Devin Singletary. And look, Singletary is the newest member of the New York Giants. There's no more Saquon Barkley there. Singletary is by far the best veteran on this team. He's going to compete with a rookie in Tyron Tracy, who I do think is talented, definitely. Jashawn Corbin, Eric Gray, who they're saying is having a better year, a 2nd-year player, 5th round pick, former guy. This is Devin Singletary's backfield. And now Singletary is reunited with Brian Daboll, his head coach. They were together in Buffalo for the first 3 years of Singletary's career. And guess what? In all 3 of those years, he went for over 1,000 total yards. Now in round 10, I said running backs over wide receivers, you want to lean here unless you can still get a great tight end or quarterback. We already have our quarterback. Let's go tight end. We'll get Jalen Hurts as tight end in Dallas Goedert. To get a little bit of a benefit here, you stack the wide receiver with the quarterback. Not as important in season-long leagues, but still if Jalen Hurts or if Dallas Goedert is balling out, there's a good chance that Jalen Hurts is throwing him that touchdown, throwing him those 80 yards. So there's a little bit of correlation there, but also I think there's a big tier break. I can see Goddard finishing as a top 3 or a top 5 tight end in fantasy. After him, though, it kind of falls off a little bit of a gap between the next guys. So this is where I try and get that guy in round 10, secure my tight end, and now I'm good moving forward. So you get Goddard there. And now the one thing I want to say before we get into round 11, where it starts to become like these are your potential league winners. In round 11 and after that, if you nail on a pick there and your other league mates don't, you are miles ahead of them. I just want to let the beautiful people watching know that over 60% of you are not subscribed to this channel over the last 28 days. It's slowly changing as more data comes in, but we're nowhere near my goal of 50-50. I want to get it to 50% by week 1 in September. A lot of people just don't remember, but now I want to remind you, here's your urge, hit the subscribe button as it helps me out. And now in round 11, you want to get the best available running back or wide receiver. And in the 11th round for me, it ended up being a wide receiver. And at this point in the draft, it's kind of just like a gross spot, round 11. Like I'd rather just have guys who go a little bit later, but we had to take a guy here and his name is Gabe Davis. Gabe Davis is now a member of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He'll kind of be like their new downfield receiver, what he did in Buffalo, where he kind of failed to break out despite having Stephon Diggs draw away attention and a good quarterback in Josh Allen. So I am a little bit skeptical on Gabe Davis, but it's not like you have to take him in round 4 or 5 where you had to take him last year and the year before that, or round 5, 7, wherever it might be these last couple of years for Gabe Davis. Now it's round 11 where he's going to be competing with the rookie and Brian Thomas, who is definitely athletic and has some upside, and Christian Kirk. So I think the competition is pretty strong here, but this should be an offense that throws top 10, maybe top 5 in the NFL, and it should be an offense where Gabe Davis has a clear role. Stretch the field. They didn't really have a guy who can do that last year consistently. Gabe Davis, that's what he's known for doing. Now in rounds 12 through 14, you either want to grab a tight end if you didn't get one already, or then get the best available wide receivers or running backs. We already have our tight end. We got Dallas Goedert, but let me show you some options of guys that I would be targeting in this range, like around round 12 to 14. In case you didn't get your tight end yet, Dalton Schultz is not somebody I want. TJ Hawkinson is not somebody I want, but this is a guy that I really like. Pat Freiermuth, you can get in round 12 pretty often, almost every single time. You scroll a little bit more and you can start to see some other tight ends. I don't want Cole Kmet. No way in heck. He goes way too early. But if you scroll a little bit more and you get into rounds 13 to 14, this is where some more value pieces can start to pop up. And guys like Hunter Henry, I think, is a nice option. In some instances, Tyler Conklin, but I'd rather get to Hunter Henry here. So Hunter Henry, Pat Freiermuth, even Cade Otton if you're really down at this point in round 14. But assuming you have your tight end by now, let's look for the best available wide receiver or running back. And here's a tip for you. You want to prioritize younger players with upside in these later rounds of drafts. And in round 12 for me, since we already had our tight end, this younger player with upside is the wide receiver in Jalen Polk. Now, if you're not familiar with Jalen Polk, he is a 6'1", 203 pounds, so a nice size wide receiver. You can see right here, he is a rookie, just 22 years old, out of Washington, and here's what he did in Washington last season. Again, this was a pass-first Washington team. Last season, despite competing with a guy in Rome Odunze, who went top 10 overall in the NFL draft, you still saw Jalen Polk put up nearly 1,200 yards. He probably has the best hands. He's a nice downfield receiver, but can also win in the slot. And again, I want to emphasize his hands. The dude just doesn't drop the ball. He has physicality. He wins at the catch point. He's absolutely great. And there's a chance he could be the #1 receiver on this Patriots team, because let's pull it up right here. You can pull it up on Player Profiler. Here's the thing. There's just nobody that's really standing out as an obvious competition piece. I think Demario Douglas at this point in drafts is still a talented player. I think Kendrick Bourne's coming off an injury. Okay. A 4th round pick in Javon Baker. Okay. Juju, I'm not too worried about, right? KJ Osborne, I'm not too worried about. There's not really any standout threats, but Jalen Polk is standing out right now in camp apparently. Now in round 13, again, we already have our tight end, so I still want to look at the best available running back or wide receiver, and I went with wide receiver Darnell Mooney. Now, Darnell Mooney, over the last couple of seasons, people might be like, oh, how do you like Darnell Mooney? But now he's on the Falcons, right? I don't care about what he did the last 2 years on the Bears when he only had 31 catches and 40 catches, because that was the Chicago Bears, a team that last season ranked 28th in passing plays per game, throwing just 30.2 times per game. The year before that, they ranked dead last. And last year, even though they went up to 28th, which is not a big improvement, their quarterback was Justin Fields, who stunk. He stunk last season. Let's look at his accuracy. Oh, his accuracy? 32nd in the NFL in accuracy rating. Not great. There's only 32 NFL teams. So you get Mooney in this new offense with Kirk Cousins to be his wide receiver too, and he's a guy who can win downfield. Darnell Mooney with speed, kind of like a Jordan Addison last year, who had a solid season in his rookie season in like this somewhat Darnell Mooney role. Now, I definitely think Mooney is a totally different receiver, a faster receiver, not as good as a route runner as Addison, and last year Addison benefited from guys like Justin Jefferson being out. But either way, Mooney, when you're looking in your drafts, I took him in the 13th round right here. Again, it's underdog. Wide receivers go earlier based on the scoring on underdog drafts and best ball, but Darnell Mooney's probably not going to like your 15th round. And if you're getting Mooney in the 15th round, the #2 wide receiver for Kirk Cousins, yeah, I like that. Now in round 14, again, we have our tight end. We're still in this idea of going either a tight end, but we have him. So now either a running back or a wide receiver, the best available. I go running back here with Antonio Gibson. And look, I'll be honest with you, we already have Ramondre Stevenson. I don't love handcuffing my running backs. Just the other running backs at this point in drafts kind of stunk, and I just have so many wide receivers at this point. So many guys that Antonio Gibson was a glaring, obvious pick for me to take in round 14. He probably fell about 10 to 15 picks past ADP. So I went ahead and I grabbed him, a guy who can be a nice pass catching running back for a rookie quarterback in Drake May once he takes over. Now in round 15, let's get specific. You want to target either Tyler Boyd or Jalen Polk, otherwise get the best available wide receiver or running back. Now we actually took Jalen Polk in like round 12 of this draft, but like I said, he's going to fall in your home leagues because just the way that scoring is on underdog. He goes 169th overall, so that's round 16. But you can also get guys like Demario Douglas are a nice option in this range. You scroll a little bit more and you start to get some other players at the wide receiver position. I mean, Jermaine Burton starts to become appealing. You might even be able to get him in like round 16 of your drafts, maybe even later. Now we broke down the reasons why I like Jalen Polk earlier, the potential #1 receiver for the Patriots, but let's talk about Tyler Boyd, because yes, I also like Tyler Boyd, the newest member of the Tennessee Titans, who's reconnected with his former offensive coordinator in Brian Callahan, the new head coach of the Titans, and he spent time as the offensive coordinator for Tyler Boyd these last few seasons when Tyler Boyd's having great seasons, playing in every game, earning 98, 83 targets. This is while playing next to T. Higgins. This is while playing next to Jamar Chase. Nowhere near, or maybe they're close, but not the same talent of receivers now that he has on the Titans. Based on their names, Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, they're great, but they're just aging developing players. They're not in the prime of their careers like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins have been the last 2 years when Boyd was playing with them. But now Boyd is going to be the starting slot receiver on this team that wants to throw the ball, according to their new head coach, Brian Callahan, a lot more. And he went out and handpicked Tyler Boyd late in free agency and said, you're now my starting slot receiver once again. I'm probably going to give you, what do you know, 100 plus targets or so. And he's going in round 15, maybe even 16 of drafts. I like that for Tyler Boyd. Now in round 16, you want to target a running back that has upside. And specifically, I'm looking for Tyron Tracy. And lucky for me, that's exactly what happened in this draft. In round 16, I got Tyron Tracy. But the idea here is to get an upside running back. Late in drafts, a guy who, if there's one injury happens, they can just take over. That can happen for Tyron Tracy with the Giants. We talked about Devin Singletary earlier. Other than Devin Singletary, nobody else is really a threat in that backfield. And also about Braylon Allen. Braylon Allen's a nice option in round 16 too. A target a running back with upside. Breece Hall, we love him. If something happens to Breece Hall, as of right now, it looks like Braylon Allen, the rookie, is coming along in the Jets camp as their clear running back too, and catching passes better than people expected. Now for the guy who's my priority in this round, yeah, Tyron Tracy is somebody that I really do like. He went in the 5th round of the drafts. He's an absolutely elite athlete, as you can see right here for his size, around 215 pounds. Ran a 4.40. That's great. He's a former wide receiver, transitioned to the running back position, just knows how to break tackles, be explosive, and again, only Devin Singletary is ahead of him in this Giants pecking order as like a potential playmaker, or at least a veteran that coaches trust. Now in round 17 and 18, you want to take the best available position for depth spots. Typically, this will be a backup quarterback or tight end. Now this is exactly what I did here. In round 17, I got Daniel Jones, my backup quarterback, and I got Greg Dulcich, who's returning from injury to be the starting tight end most likely for the Denver Broncos, my backup tight end there in round 18 with the last pick in my drafts. If you're somebody who has a league where you have to still draft kickers and defenses, well, here's another tip for you. Just don't draft the defense or even a kicker. Just hold another positional player until week 1, and then you could drop them, because maybe something will happen and that positional player that you have on your depth chart now is becoming a valuable piece. Now, some other targets that I really like in these ranges late in the drafts, they went in this draft, unfortunately. Guys like Noah Fant, a great, or even a tight end 1, a part of the Seahawks team now. There's no Will Dissly. There's no Colby Parkinson. They got the upgrade in their offensive coordinator. And then at quarterback, J.J. McCarthy might not start the first couple of weeks of the season, but this top 10 overall pick, the quarterback for the Minnesota Vikings, good head coach out there, good surrounding pieces. He'll start at some point, and he's a solid backup in my opinion. So round by round, this is what you should be trying to do in your draft based on the hundreds of drafts I've done this offseason and even last offseason and seasons before that to try and win your league. And we sprinkled in a bunch of tips in there as well. Now this video kind of just says exactly the strategy and the tips that you need. It's going to be very valuable for you. But if you want to see the players that you need to avoid because they might lose you your league, well, check out this lovely video right over here.